Somebody working on my rear brakes on my 2010 Dodge Grand Caravan. This should be similar on the Volkswagen Routan up to about 2019, I'm thinking. As you'll see in a minute here, they have the rear disc brakes. Right now I'm just working on the wheel lug nuts. So I just loosened them a little bit. Then I jacked it up a little bit. Just makes it a lot easier than if the wheel is spinning. I didn't take them off until I had the wheel off the ground. Put the wheel out of the way. And here's our brakes. Now there's a couple bolts on the top here. There's two of them that are holding the caliper to the bracket. They should be 13 millimeter. And then I found out, oh, my bottom one's different. Yeah, I remember something happened. It broke or something way back, and I got a replacement one through a parts store, and it was actually 14 millimeter. That's okay though. Should be 13, the one yours, but it might be a 14. You probably have a couple different wrenches. So I got it off. Both of them, put them somewhere where I don't lose them. The inner part of that may want to spin a little bit when you're taking these bolts out. See how that moves a little bit? Might just have to grab it with a pair of pliers or something. Not the rubber, but right there on the metal. It actually kind of has a nut there. Get that off there. That actually had a little bit of anti-seize on it, just make them easier to come out. I'm going to gently pry on this caliper. It should pop off. And I'll want to tie it. Whoa. Oh, hear that snap? I thought, what's going on? It's just the emergency brake cable right there. Make some creaking. I want to tie it up, and there's not too much. The front brakes has places to tie it up, but not the back. So I just took a tie strap. I'm going to tie it to this coil. Just don't want to hurt the brake hose. Now, there's a couple of bolts in the back here as well. They're 18 millimeter. Try and loosen them off. Chrysler uses a lot of big 18 millimeter bolts and different things. This 18 millimeter wrench, good to have. Most sets don't have 18s. They all go 15, 17, 19. It's probably something you don't have. I originally had to get it when I had a Dodge Charger way back. So I've got them kind of loose. I think I've got one of them off there. I'm going to just pull these brake pads out. I'm tossing them. They have had it. As you can see too with the rotor. Actually hasn't been working proper for a while. Remember those little tabs there? That's how they're sitting in there. They're actually sitting, there's little tin plates in there that'll pop out. You can kind of see them there. And pull this bottom bolt off of there that's holding the rest of this bracket. It's another one of those 18 millimeter. Have to make sure that I'm trying to loosen it the right way. I found it was easier to hit it with a hammer. Good to have some eye protection on while I'm doing this. Never know, something could go flying. There we go. It's coming off now. It's a pretty big bolt. Of course, this bracket's going to want to fall off. It's just kind of sitting there now. Just get it out of the way. Oh, sit it on the ground. And this, well, it should just fall off. On these vans, it's just sitting there. I'll speed it up a little bit. Oh. I don't know how long that took. Got her off anyway. Figured I'd clean this hub up a little bit. Guess the guy could always take a wire brush to it. Clean it up a little bit with some brake clean. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put some nickel anti-seize on it after. So I've got my rotor. I'm going to put it on backwards, just so that I've got something for it to hold on to. Have to excuse my little bit of sniffling. Had a really bad cold. I did test. No, I didn't have what you think I had. I just had a bad cold. So I'm just putting some of this anti-seize. This is nickel anti-seize. I'm going to put some inside the face of the rotor as well. Next time it should just fall off. Get it on there. I'm just going to take one of my nuts and just put it on there just so it holds on. Because nothing holds this one on. Some vehicles have a screw that goes in one spot just to hold the rotor on, but these don't. Your wheel basically holds it on. I get my caliper now. Move it a little bit out of the way here, gently. And I need to turn this piston in. Now you'll notice that there's a couple little indentations here. There's a special tool that you use. This doesn't just push in, it actually turns as it's going in. And I noticed the boot here is kind of deformed a little bit, I guess, because it's been turning as it's slowly been working its way out. So this is the kind of toolkit that I got. And it's got left hand thread and right hand thread depending on which side you're doing. It's got all these different kinds of little spacers with different finger sizes. And it just kind of sits on there magnetically. And those two little nibs or whatever that are sticking out are going to go into those holes that are on the back of the piston. I'm going to use this little piece in here too, so I've got some force against the caliper fingers. That all makes sense. Oh, there we go. Try that again. Goes in there, and this either screws in or screws out depending on which one you're using, which side you're doing. Try to put a link in the description for this kit. Otherwise it's pretty hard to do this. And look, even look the amount of pressure I'm using here. Plus I'm worried about that boot. I don't want to wreck it. I was turning pretty hard too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and gently pick the boot off there just a little bit and try not to make a hole in it. And I'm going to spray some lube in there, a little bit of WD-40. I'm hoping between the, it's just a dust boot, between that and the piston, it can work its way in there, and as I turn it, the boot will stop turning. So I just kind of moved it around a little bit just to see what it was doing. It's like, it still seems to want to move. So I thought, well, better just add a little more lube in there, maybe take a little bit more of the edge of the boot off. So that's what I did here, sprayed some more stuff in there. Hopefully it's going to work all around. Again, sorry for the sniffling. Not the easiest thing to do. Speed it up a little bit here again. You've seen this part before. Get that back in there. And try and turn it back and forth and back and forth. There, now I could hear it moving a little bit against the rubber, but it's still kind of, I have to do it one more time, I guess. Really didn't want to rip the boot. Oh, actually it's staying stationary. Nice. You see I'm turning it in, and I'm putting a lot of force on this thing to get it to turn in. Some may say maybe you can use like needle nose pliers and hold them into there and then screwdriver and twist. I don't think so. Plus I found after that I had turned it in just a little bit too far.
Should have done that.
Of course I didn't figure that out till I had the pads on. I'm going to take these apart and lube them up too. I don't know if you can see, they actually move up and down too, besides in and out. And they're, I guess, worn a little bit. Plus the grease in there is probably, once I put new grease in there, clean it up, put new grease in there, that slop will be gone. So maybe you've noticed a little bit of banging in the back. These are on back brakes. You can do it on the front brakes too. Find if those pins aren't lubed up. I don't know, every couple of years or something like that, I find. It doesn't hurt to do them. I'm going to try and clean this out in here too. Get all the old lube out of there. Using this brake clean again. Trying to get a rag or a cloth in there. Guess I could take, and I did that off camera, a small screwdriver, and I tried digging out the old stuff in there. Got it all cleaned out. Got a rag in there a little more. So that's the one side. Did the other side as well. Just have to get it all moving around. Cleaned it all out, let it dry. Actually, what I did is I got compressed air and I blew it out. So you can always blow it out if you have a little compressor. And then these pins, we see this kind of gross looking too. Who knows how many heat cycles this has had. The special lube for this, I'm not going to use the anti-seize that I was using for the rotors. There's actual a high temperature brake lube. So I'm making these nice and clean. The end all around them. Helps to stick your thumb fingernail in some of those indentations. Same with this. I'm going to try and clean this boot out inside. And here's the brake lube. It's just a brake lube. This is a synthetic one. I don't know if that really matters too much. It's what was available when I bought it. I'm going to put a fairly liberal amount of stuff on here. I'm going to try and get this boot back on. There you go. It pops on. Again, I'm going to try and make sure that this is nice and clean. I'm going to add a little bit of lube in there. I'm going to kind of work it around in there. Try and get some of the air out. A little more lube. There are skippable chapters, so if you want to go to the next bit, you can. Or just kind of watch how I'm doing this. It's not going to take very long. This one looks like you still have a little bit of old dirty oil in there. You can hear some of the air coming out. I'll wipe that end off there a little bit so that the rubber piece can snap on there. I think one more little bit of lube in there. Just doesn't seem like there's enough. Not enough for my liking. Get the little rubber boot to fit over the spot that it sits on. Doesn't hurt to spin it around a little bit too once it's on there. Make sure it's on. And that looks good. It feels quite a bit different. Now, I'm going to clean up these little pieces that those little 10 sliders fit into. You can take a wire brush, or maybe if you have a wire wheel on a bench grinder, or maybe you have a little wire wheel that you can run on, with a drill. Before I forget to, these clips, they've got an edge that sticks out. It always faces away from the rotor on either side. Like this is the outside we're looking at. On the inside, they also face away from the tire or the rotor as well. Plus you have to remember there's a high side and a low side, a back or whatever that you'll want to mate up properly with this piece. So a couple bolts we're going to put back in. And which way does this sit? It sits like this. Well, I just wanted to show you too, I had these nice and clean. So this is this high side I was talking about and a low side. So the clips that go in there also look like that. So the high will go to the high side. The low side will go to the low side. Remember, there'll be a clip on either the left or right side, and you want to make sure that's away from the rotor. It'll make sense once you look at them. Mine came in 2 different bags, and one were all faced one way and all faced the other way. I don't know why they didn't have half and half. You can actually see here that little clip facing outside again. Do some jiggling. Snug this one up. I should also snug the top one up. This is out of order. I torqued them to 74 foot-pounds, but I actually had snugged the top one up as well. Whereas I see the way this ended up being edited is a little bit backwards. I didn't show you me putting this bolt in first and then torquing it. Because if you torque the bottom one first or the top one first and torque it right up and then try and put that bolt in, it's probably not going to fit. You're going to have to do some jiggling and moving around. So again, here's, it's a squealer. This one sits on the back side. And when you get down to a low enough pad, that thing will squeal against the rotor. You'll still have brakes for quite some time, but it's a warning, and it should be annoying enough that it makes you want to replace them. That's the whole purpose. I'll put some of this brake lube on this little finger that's sticking out. I kind of almost put a little bit too much in here, but it'll just help them slide. There's no springs in this thing, right? It puts pressure on the brakes. Then when it just releases the brake, there's no spring to pull it back like the old drum brakes were. So I want to make sure that all this stuff, get a little bit too much on my fingers. I should have used the Q-tip, the 007 method, as my friend Timmy would say. I'm sorry I didn't do it that way, but then I wouldn't get your finger dirty. Sit that in there. And look at that. I'm just going to wipe a little bit of the excess off. The stuff should be high temperature, so it'll be fine. But one last thing I need to put a little bit of lube is on the piston and on these fingers. So they're going to be sitting against the pads, and sometimes the pads might just shake a little bit. And because they're rubbing against the other metal there, they might make a squeal or a howl or something like that. So by putting this, a little bit of this lube on there, it should keep them nice and quiet. That's the theory behind it anyway. Now hopefully the piston's in far enough. You might have to open your brake reservoir under the hood just to let a little bit of the pressure off. And now one of these little the sliders here doesn't want to go in all the way, so I have to give it a little bit of friendly persuasion. I have to do that to the top and to the bottom as well. I'm just having a hard time breathing in this. I was so sick, I had quite the cold. And yeah, a person could put maybe a teeny bit of a different type of anti-seize on there, maybe just a little bit. And you'll see that when you do the bolt up, that may want to spin too. It's a nut that's part of that slider. You may want to just take a pair of pliers or something and hold it. Not sure what the torque specs are on this. I just made them pretty tight. I tried to look it up in one of my manuals there, and it had the 74 foot-pounds for the other thing. I don't think these are 74 foot-pounds. Make sure that the handbrake goes all the way back. Oh, it's a parking brake, I guess is what you want to call it. It's not a handbrake, it's a foot pedal. And that also is adjusting that piston. Now I found out that after checking the parking brake cables, I had to turn the piston back maybe a half a turn since the pads weren't actually touching good enough. I had to do it a couple times. These aftermarket pads don't have any holes in them for those nubs. Maybe a little extra work there. Now this has aluminum rims, or it did. These are my summer rims. And you've got aluminum touching a steel rotor. And those two dissimilar metals basically corrode together. So if you use something like this nickel anti-seize, it's good for dissimilar metals. That's why I'm using nickel. And that way, if you have to take the wheel off later, you're not pounding it. You've seen some of those things where they can't get the wheel off with all the nuts off. That's because the shop never putting that stuff on there. I'm just snugging them very lightly. I'm going to do a two-step torque process just because, I don't know, I like to do it that way. So I put them maybe at about 75 foot-pounds or something like that. And then I just let the wheel down just enough so it didn't spin. Get my jack out of there, my jack stand. I believe factory torque specs are 100 foot-pounds. And then recheck them a little later on. That was that. There's more to it. I made sure that I had brake before I tried to move anywhere. The pedal seemed good because you never know, maybe you don't have brake. There's a brake-in procedure too. 30 quick decelerations from 30 miles an hour to 5 miles an hour. Let it cool off for 30 seconds, then do it again 30 times. That's why you want to make sure you have brakes before you try that. Well, that's going to do it for the video. Easy, not necessarily, especially if you don't have that tool, be able to turn in the piston. And like I mentioned, that was on the passenger side. That goes in a certain way. On the driver's side, goes in the complete opposite way. And it's going to be tough to do without that specialized tool. But I'll put a link in the description. Once you have those tools, you can do it for yourself and maybe for others as well. Please give me the thumbs up if the video was of help to you. You can subscribe down in the corner as well. That way you won't miss any more videos on the Grand Caravan and others. Plus, how about a playlist right here? Yep. Right above there, you'll see the flashing yellow arrow pointing to a card or a link that'll bring you to a playlist on all the videos that I've done on the Grand Caravan. Done the older ones, 08 and up, and then I think 12 and newer as well. Until next time, I'm Uncle Mark saying thanks for watching. You and your family stay safe. Bye-bye for now. Please subscribe, and you'll get all the notifications. It's easy. The little dog will show you how. Ring the bell. Ring the bell. The factory is 13. Darn it. Oh.